Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Douglas, and I'll be telling a story of what happens when you push a man away for too long. People always want to eat their cake and still have it. They want the best of both worlds, thinking they can make choices without facing the consequences. But life doesn't work that way. You don't get to take without giving, and you can't expect to hold onto something while treating it like it doesn't matter. I've always believed that when you commit to something, whether it's a job, a friendship, or a marriage, you have to be all in. Otherwise, what's the point? But my wife, Megan, learned this the hard way. My wife, Megan, was everything I wanted in a partner. From the moment I met her, I knew she was someone I wanted by my side. Marrying her wasn't just a choice. It was the easiest decision I had ever made. If I could have, I would have married her over and over again every single time. But here's the thing, wanting something to last forever doesn't mean it will. You can think you have everything figured out, that you've made the right choices, and still find yourself standing in the middle of something you never saw coming. Marriage isn't perfect. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or hasn't been married long enough. Megan and I had our fair share of disagreements over the years, but we always had a way of working through them. That was one of the things I valued most about our relationship, our ability to communicate. We talked about everything. Whether it was small annoyances or bigger concerns, we made it a habit to sit down, hash things out, and find common ground. It wasn't always easy, but we made the effort because we both wanted our marriage to work. But lately, something felt different. Megan had changed, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why. She started acting differently, pulling away from me in ways that felt intentional. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she was just having a rough week. But as the days turned into weeks, and then months, it became clear something was wrong. Conversations that used to flow naturally now felt forced. She'd give me short answers, barely making eye contact, and she would shut down whenever I tried to dig deeper. If I asked her how she felt, she'd say she was fine. If I asked her what was wrong, she'd tell me nothing. It wasn't just emotional distance either. She started getting irritable over the smallest things. I'd ask her what she wanted for dinner, and she'd snap at me for always making her decide. The warmth, the closeness, the connection we had, it was disappearing, and I had no idea why. Normally, I would have confronted it head-on, but I was in the middle of one of the most demanding projects of my career. I barely had time to think, let alone pick apart the sudden shift in my wife's behavior. So, I let it go, assuming it was just a phase. I told myself things would go back to normal once my workload eased up. But the more time passed, the worse things got. The affection between us completely faded. She stopped touching me altogether. No quick kisses, no playful nudges. Even when I tried to initiate, she would pull away, acting as if the idea of being close to me was exhausting. Every time, she had an excuse. She was tired. She had a headache. She was stressed from work. And while I wanted to believe her, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. I just didn't know yet. When my project finally wrapped up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The long hours, the constant deadlines, it was all over. I could finally breathe. And more importantly, I could finally give my full attention to something that had been nagging at me for months. Megan and her mood swings. Now that I had no distractions, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Something was wrong, and I needed to find out what. So, I sat her down one evening, calmly asking her what was going on. Why had she been so distant? Why did it feel like we weren't even in the same marriage anymore? I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for what actually happened. She snapped. Full-blown irritation, like I had just accused her of something awful. She told me I was being insensitive, that she was dealing with a lot, and I wasn't making things any easier. That response caught me off guard. Dealing with a lot? Since when did she shut me out instead of telling me what was wrong? We had always been open with each other, but now it felt like she was putting up a wall, and I wasn't allowed to get through. I tried again, asking if there was something I could do if she needed support, but she just brushed me off. "You wouldn't understand," she muttered before walking away. That was it. That was the end of the conversation. I sat there for a long time after she left the room, wondering. Whatever was going on, she didn't want me to be part of it. As the days passed, she didn't even seem to care. She came and went as she pleased, barely telling me where she was going. We used to check in with each other, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Now, she could disappear for hours, and I wouldn't hear a word. And when she was home, it wasn't any better. We barely spoke, like we were strangers trying to make small talk. I know I shouldn't, but I kept praying she would snap out of whatever this was and realize she was hurting me. But weeks passed, then months, and nothing changed. If anything, she was pulling even further away. The more I waited, the more I felt like I was losing her. And at some point, I had to wonder, was she even mine to lose anymore? I decided to talk to her friends. Maybe they'd noticed a change or had some insight. If something was going on with her, surely the people closest to her would have picked up on it. I reached out casually, at first, mentioning that Megan had been acting distant. But their responses threw me off. They acted like nothing was wrong. One of her closest friends even laughed and said Megan was the same as always. That didn't make any sense. I had been living with a completely different version of my wife for months. Was she just good at hiding it around other people, or was I missing something? The more I asked, the more I realized none of them had a clue. That made me question everything. Were they covering for her? It felt like she had already checked out of the marriage, and I was the only one still holding on for the past 6 months. I decided I was done waiting. If she was tired of the marriage, I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I had my limits, and I had reached them. So, I pulled away completely. I stopped making conversation and stopped trying to get her attention. I even stopped coming home on most days. My office was designed to be comfortable, and for the first time, I let it be more than just a workspace. It became my escape. At night, I slept on the sofa, used the private bathroom, and kept to myself. My staff didn't even notice. To them, I was just the boss who stayed late, always working on something. The only people who knew were the security guys, who didn't ask questions. At first, I thought it would be hard, that I'd miss being home. But the more I stayed away, the more peace I found. I didn't have to second-guess every interaction, didn't have to wonder if I was doing something wrong. I could just exist without the weight of trying to fix something that was already broken. I wasn't sure what Megan thought about it, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. Then, out of nowhere, Megan texted me, "Please come home." For a split second, my stomach dropped. Was something wrong? Was she hurt? I almost called, but something told me to wait. If it were an emergency, she wouldn't have just sent a text like that. She would have called. Still, curiosity got the best of me, and that evening, I finally went home after being away for so long. The second I stepped in, I observed everything. Megan was suddenly warm, affectionate, even playful. She smiled and told me welcome immediately when she saw me. She laughed, touched my arm, and made little jokes about how I had abandoned her. She said she missed me all day and had been waiting for me to come home. The whole act was so sudden, so unnatural, that I just stood there, watching her, trying to figure out what was really going on. She must have noticed I wasn't responding the way she expected, because she switched tactics. She sighed, lowered her voice, and apologized for the distance between us. Said she had been going through something. But even as she spoke, I could see it, the nervous energy, the way she kept glancing at me like she was afraid of what I might say. Or maybe afraid of what I might already know. I didn't argue. I didn't push for answers. I just let her talk while I watched, filing everything away in the back of my mind. Because no matter how much she tried to act like she had just woken up one day and decided to be a better wife, I knew there had to be more to the story. And I was right. The real answers came a week later. Megan's friend called me one evening. I had just finished up at the office and was about to head out when my phone buzzed. The last time we talked, she told me she hadn't noticed anything off about Megan. So I wondered why she was reaching out now. Something told me to pick up, and the second I answered, she didn't waste time with small talk. She just said, "Douglas, I need to tell you the truth. Since Megan won't, I will." My hands tightened around the phone as I braced myself. She told me that Megan had been cheating on me. That was the reason she was pushing me away those past months, because she was emotionally invested in another man. I didn't say a word. I just let her talk. Apparently, Megan thought she had found something better, someone more exciting. But reality had caught up to her in the worst way. The man she had been seeing? He didn't love her. He didn't even care about her. He was just using her for money. The friend went on, explaining how Megan had been financially supporting this guy, probably thinking she was building something with him. But the moment he got what he wanted, he disappeared, ghosted her completely. And that's when it all made sense. That's why Megan had suddenly changed. That's why she was acting like the wife I used to know. It wasn't because she missed me or she realized she had been wrong. It was because she had nowhere else to go. Her little fantasy had crashed, and now she wanted to crawl back to the stability she had with me. Hearing this made my chest tighten. I was hurt in a way I couldn't even describe. The woman I had loved had thrown it all away for some loser who didn't even care about her. And now that he was gone, she expected me to be her safety net. But the worst part? If her friend hadn't told me, Megan would have never said a word. She would have kept playing the role, pretending to be the loving wife, hoping I'd never find out what she had done. I was grateful that someone had the decency to tell me the truth, because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I woke up the next morning with a clear mind. It was time to hear it from her mouth. She was in the kitchen, making breakfast. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and got straight to the point. "You've been acting different lately," I said, watching her closely. "First, you couldn't stand being near me. Now you're acting like you can't get enough of me. What changed, Megan?" She forced a smile like she wasn't expecting me to call it out so directly. "I told you I was just going through something," she said, turning back to the stove. "And honestly, Douglas, you weren't exactly affectionate either. Maybe if you had paid more attention to me, things wouldn't have gotten so bad." I leaned back in my chair. "So that's what we're doing? We're making this about me." I shook my head. "Let me ask you something, Megan. Was that why you started seeing another man?" She dropped the spatula, and for a moment, the entire room went silent. She didn't turn around. "Look at me," I said. My voice was calm, steady, but firm. Slowly, she turned around, not even trying to deny it. She knew, and she knew that I knew. I nodded to myself. That's what I thought. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I wasn't interested in her tears. "Let me guess," I continued. "You thought you had something special with him, didn't you? You thought you found something better. But turns out he was just using you. And when you realized he was only in it for your money, he left you, didn't he?" That broke her. She began sobbing. "Douglas, please." I cut her off. "Spare me, Megan." She kept crying, mumbling excuses, kept trying to paint herself as the victim. But I wasn't interested in whatever story she was trying to spin. The truth was simple. She checked out of our marriage long before I did. She convinced herself that the grass was greener somewhere else, that I was the problem, and that she deserved more. And now, when it all blew up in her face, she wanted to come crawling back, hoping I'd be the safety net to catch her fall. But I wasn't that man anymore. I had already made my decision the moment her friend told me the truth. No amount of tears or apologies could erase what she did. The only reason I even brought it up was to see if she would lie to my face. And she didn't. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It just confirmed what I already knew. Our marriage was over. Filing for divorce wasn't an easy decision, but by the time I did, I knew there was no other option. Megan cried. She begged. She kept saying she couldn't afford to lose me, that she had made a mistake, that she just needed another chance. I didn't feel anything anymore. The damage was done, and I wasn't about to ignore the reality of what had happened. If she had truly been afraid of losing me, she never would have done what she did. You don't cheat on someone you can't afford to lose. You don't emotionally check out for months and push them away, only to panic when the consequences catch up with you. I told her plainly that the marriage was over. I couldn't trust her, and without trust, there was nothing left to fight for. She tried to argue, throwing every excuse she could think of, but I stayed firm. I wasn't going to let guilt, nostalgia, or some desperate attempt at damage control pull me back into something that was already broken beyond repair. At first, she refused to accept it. She went from crying to getting angry, demanding to know why I was giving up so easily. That part almost made me laugh. Giving up? I had held on for 6 months while she ignored me. I had tried to talk, to understand what was happening, and she had shut me out. I wasn't the one who gave up. She had a long time ago. She just didn't realize it until now. Eventually, when it became clear that I wasn't changing my mind, she stopped fighting. She got a lawyer, and so did I. There was no dramatic court battle over assets or settlements. We handled everything amicably and quickly, like two people tying up loose ends rather than two people who once built a life together. Walking away from the marriage hurt. No matter how much she had betrayed me, it was still an ending, and endings always come with pain. But I knew without a doubt that staying would have hurt more. Trust is like glass. Once it's shattered, you can try to piece it back together, but the cracks will always be there. And I wasn't willing to live in a marriage full of cracks, waiting for the next time it all came crashing down. That's how life works. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences mean losing something you never thought you'd let go of. Looking back, I know my job kept me busy. There were long hours, late nights, and days when I barely had the energy to do anything else. But I never once used my work as an excuse to neglect my wife. I still made time for her, still checked in, and still tried to be present. Work didn't break our marriage, her choices did. No matter how tired or stressed she felt, cheating was never the answer. If she was unhappy, she had every opportunity to talk to me, to tell me how she felt, to work through it together. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that you can't force someone to be faithful, and you shouldn't have to beg for the bare minimum in a relationship. I wasted months trying to understand what was wrong, trying to fix something that was already broken because she had made up her mind long before I even realized there was a problem. If your partner is shutting you out, refusing to communicate, and making you feel like a stranger in your own home, don't ignore it. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. And if they can't give you that, then it's not your job to carry the weight of the relationship alone. Walk away before you lose yourself trying to hold on to someone who already let go. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have given her another chance? Or would you have walked away like I did? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.